I sold my house on a Tuesday. The realtor called it a clean sale, no conditions, no drama, just a check and a handshake. I stood in the driveway of the home where I'd raised my daughter for 31 years, watched the new owners pull in with a moving truck, and I told myself I was happy. I told myself this was what mothers do. I should have asked more questions before I signed anything. But when your daughter calls you crying at 11 o'clock on a Sunday, saying they're going to lose the house, they've put an offer on that the financing fell through, and they need $180,000 in 3 days, or the deal collapses, you don't stop to ask questions. You stop to think about what you can do. My name is Margaret. I'm 67 years old. I spent 32 years as a registered nurse at St. Michael's Hospital in Toronto, and I have one daughter. Her name is Claire. I loved that house on Elmwood Avenue. It wasn't big. 3 bedrooms, a backyard with a cedar deck my late husband built the summer before he got sick, a kitchen that smelled like coffee every morning because the neighbor's vent was right beside my window. I'd paid it off 12 years before. When I retired, I figured I'd live there until they carried me out. I had my garden. I had my routine. I had my neighbor Pat, who brought me soup every time the weather turned cold and never once made me feel like a burden. But Claire needed me, and I have never once in my life been able to hear that and do nothing. Her husband's name is Richard. He's a corporate lawyer in Oakville, the kind of man who uses the word equity the way other people use the word okay, just slipping it into every conversation like it belongs there. He comes from money, old money, the kind that doesn't need to talk about itself because everyone already knows. His mother hosts Christmas dinner in a house with a wine cellar and heated floors, and she once told me, very politely, that Claire was lucky to have found someone so established. I smiled. I've been smiling at that woman for 6 years. When Claire called that Sunday night, Richard was in the background. I could hear him talking, but not the words. What I heard clearly was my daughter's voice, tight and high the way it gets when she's trying not to cry in front of someone, saying, "Mom, I don't know what to do. We put everything into this offer. If we lose it, we lose the deposit too. $40,000. I asked how much they needed. She paused. The bank approved us for the mortgage, but we're short on the down payment to satisfy the purchase conditions. We need $180,000. I told her I would call her back in the morning. I didn't sleep that night. I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of tea that went cold, looking at the backyard, thinking about my husband. He would have said, "Margaret, you only have one daughter." He would have been right. He also would have said, "Make sure you protect yourself." I didn't listen hard enough to the second part. I called my financial advisor the next morning. I called my lawyer. I called my bank. By Wednesday, I had listed the house, accepted an offer, and arranged a bridge loan to get Claire the money before the property closed because there wasn't time to wait for the sale to finalize. The bridge loan cost me $4,000 in fees. I didn't tell Claire about that part. The sale closed 8 weeks later, after the mortgage payout, the realtor's commission, the land transfer tax, the legal fees, and the bridge loan repayment. I had $186,000. I gave Claire $180. I kept $6,000 and moved into a 1-bedroom rental apartment in Scarborough. Claire cried when the money arrived. She said, "Mom, I promise we'll pay you back." Richard said, "We really appreciate this, Margaret." He shook my hand. He actually shook my hand, like we'd just concluded a business transaction. I suppose we had. The apartment wasn't bad. Ground floor, which I didn't love. I've always felt safer up higher, but it had big windows and a small patio where I could keep my tomato plants. I told myself it was temporary. Claire and Richard's new house was in Lakeview Estates, a neighborhood in Burlington that I'd never heard of, but apparently everyone who was anyone had. 4 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, double garage, a backyard that backed onto a conservation area. The listing price had been $1.4 million. My $180,000 had made it possible. I visited once in the first 2 months for a Sunday dinner in October. It was a beautiful house. I will give Richard that he has excellent taste, or whoever he paid to decorate had excellent taste. Everything was white and gray and deliberately placed, the kind of home that looks like no one actually lives in it. There was a framed print in the hallway that said, "Home is where your story begins." I thought about the cedar deck on Elmwood Avenue and I didn't say anything. Claire showed me around. The kitchen with the waterfall island. The primary suite with the ensuite that was bigger than my current bedroom. The guest room, the one she told me would always be mine whenever I wanted to visit. It had a white duvet and a small diffuser on the nightstand. It smelled like eucalyptus. I drove home along the QEW and cried for about 20 minutes. Not sad crying exactly, just the kind where something has shifted and you need to let it out before you can keep going. The second visit was in January. I took the GO train because the roads were bad, and Richard picked me up from the Burlington station. In the car, before we pulled into the neighborhood, he said something I've thought about nearly every day since. He said, "Margaret, I just want to mention some of our neighbors don't know the full details of how we purchased the house. We've kept things private. I'd appreciate it if you didn't bring up the financial arrangement. Just, to keep things simple." I looked at him. "What would you like me to say if someone asks?" He kept his eyes on the road. "Just that you're Claire's mum, visiting for the weekend. You don't need to get into anything else." I said, "Of course." I looked out the window at the snow coming down on the conservation area, and I thought, I see. I understood completely. He was embarrassed that his mortgage had been rescued by his mother-in-law's retirement savings. In the circles he was building in Lakeview Estates, the neighbors with the Audis, and the ski chalet bookings, and the dinner parties where people talked about their portfolios, a wife's mother selling her house to cover. The down payment was not a story that fit. I was a loose thread. He wanted me tucked away. Claire met us at the door. She hugged me for a long time. I held her and wondered how much she knew about what her husband had just said to me. That weekend, they had a dinner party on the Saturday evening. 12 people. I found out about it Friday morning when Claire mentioned it casually, the way you mention something you've already mentally filed under handled. "Oh, by the way, Mum, we have some friends coming for dinner tomorrow. You can join us, of course. I'll introduce you." The way she said "I'll introduce you" had a particular quality to it, a careful quality. The guests arrived at 7. I had helped Claire in the kitchen all afternoon. I made my butter tarts, which have never once failed to impress, and I was standing by the kitchen island when the first couple came in. Richard brought them over. "This is Margaret," he said, "a family friend of Claire's. She's up from Scarborough for the weekend." I smiled. I said it was lovely to meet them. A family friend, not Claire's mother, not the woman who funded this kitchen with the waterfall island. A family friend, the same way a painting is a family friend, present, decorative, and belonging to a category that doesn't require too much explanation. Claire was across the room. She was laughing at something another guest had said. She didn't look at me. Over the course of that evening, I was introduced to 11 people. Richard introduced me to 6 of them. He called me a family friend each time. Claire introduced me to the other 5. She called me her mum to 4 of them. To the 5th, a woman named Diane, who was apparently the most prominent person on their street, the one who organized the neighborhood association, Claire said, "This is Margaret, an old family friend from Toronto." I had a glass of Riesling, and I ate 3 of my own butter tarts, and I talked to a man named Gerald about the Raptors until he excused himself to talk to someone more useful to him. And I thought about my cedar deck. I thought about Pat and her soup. I thought about 32 years of night shifts and 12-hour days and the $186,000 that was now a waterfall island and an ensuite with heated floors. I did not make a scene. That is important to understand. I am not a person who makes scenes. I am a person who observes and files things away and decides later what to do with them. I called my lawyer on the Monday after I got home. Her name is Susan, and I've worked with her for 15 years. She handled my husband's estate. She handled the house sale. She is the kind of woman who wears reading glasses on a chain and does not waste a single word. I told her what had happened. I asked her to look at the paperwork from the house purchase. What I had not fully understood, and what Richard perhaps had also not fully understood, was the structure of the arrangement we'd made in the rush of that 3-day window. Because there had been no time to set up a proper gift or loan agreement, and because the bridge loan had been in my name, and because Susan had drawn up a basic security document at the time that neither Claire nor Richard had read carefully in their relief, I had a creditor's claim against the property, not ownership, but a legally registered financial interest tied to the $180,000 transfer that had never been formally discharged. Susan read me the relevant section over the phone. Then she said, "Margaret, did you intend this to be a gift or a loan?" I thought about Richard shaking my hand. I thought about family friend from Toronto. I thought about Diane from the Neighborhood Association, who now believed I was a pleasant acquaintance who had come up for a weekend. I said, "I believe it was a loan, Susan. I'd like to formalize that." She was quiet for a moment. "I'll prepare the documents." The call I made to Claire the following Thursday was the hardest thing I have done in recent years, and I have done some hard things. I told her I loved her. I told her I wasn't angry with her. I told her I wanted to be honest with her because I respected her too much to pretend. I told her what Richard had said in the car about keeping the financial arrangement private. I told her about the 5 introductions, and the one that had bothered me the most. Claire was quiet for a long time. I could hear her breathing. Then she said, "Mum, I didn't know he was going to say that to you." I believed her. That's the thing about knowing your child for 36 years, you know what their lies sound like, and that wasn't one of them. "I know you didn't," I said. He worries about how things look. With his colleagues, with the neighborhood. I know that's not an excuse." "It isn't," I agreed, gently. "What do you want to do?" she asked. "I want you to know what was done," I said. "And I need you to decide what kind of family we're going to be. Because I didn't sell my home so that I could be a family friend at dinner parties. I sold it because you needed me. And I would do it again. But I will not be invisible." There was another silence. Then Claire said, "I'm going to talk to Richard." That conversation between them, I wasn't there for it, and Claire only told me parts of it later, apparently lasted 4 hours. Richard's position, initially, was that he had only been trying to protect their privacy, that in professional circles appearances matter, that it was nothing personal against me. Claire's position, apparently, was that it was everything personal against me, and that she had watched her mother stand in a stranger's kitchen all evening being passed off as a pleasant acquaintance, and she had known it was wrong and done nothing about it, and she was not willing to be that person again. I don't know exactly what shifted. I think it was when Claire told him about the creditor's claim, which I had asked Susan to formally register so that it appeared properly in the property records. Richard is a lawyer. He understood immediately what that meant. It meant that if they ever sold the house, refinanced, or made a significant change to the title, my claim would surface. It wasn't punitive, the amount was fair, and the interest rate was below market, but it meant I was real. I was on paper. I was not a weekend guest who could be introduced as a family friend and quietly folded back into Scarborough on Sunday afternoon. Susan tells me this kind of registered interest is quite common in parent-assisted purchases in Ontario. She also tells me that many families never document it at all, which is how parents end up exactly where I could have ended up. I was lucky that the paperwork from that rushed week had given me something to work with. Richard called me on a Saturday morning, 3 weeks after I'd spoken to Claire. He apologized. It was a genuine apology, I think, the kind that costs something, that doesn't come with a lot of cushioning. He said he had been prioritizing his own discomfort over my dignity, and that it was wrong, and that it wouldn't happen again. He said the neighbors, the ones who'd been at the dinner party, now knew that Claire's mum had been instrumental in helping them get the house, and that he had been glad to tell them. I asked if Diane from the Neighborhood Association knew. He said she was the first person he'd told. I said, "Thank you, Richard." And I meant it. That spring, Claire invited me to Lakeview Estates for a long weekend in May. She picked me up herself from the Burlington GO station. When we pulled into the neighborhood, she didn't say anything about what to tell people. When we ran into Diane on the street, Claire put her arm through mine and said, "Diane, This is my mum, Margaret. She's the reason we were able to buy this house, and she's here for the weekend," Diane said. "Oh, we've heard so much about you. I have thought about what I did, the lawyer, the registered claim, the phone call, and whether it was the right thing. I think about it still. There are people who would say I should have confronted Richard immediately, in the car, on that January evening. They are probably right that it would have been the braver thing, but I have learned over 67 years that not every fight is best had at the moment you feel it. Sometimes you wait, you watch, you make sure you understand the full shape of the problem before you decide where to press. I also think about Claire. My daughter is not a bad person. She married someone whose world runs on appearances, and she got pulled partway in before she caught herself. That happens to good people. What matters is that she caught herself. I'm still in the apartment in Scarborough. Ground floor, big windows, tomato plants on the patio. Pat gave me a cutting from her rosemary bush when I left Elmwood, and I've kept it alive through 2 Toronto winters now, which feels like an achievement. Some mornings I sit at the kitchen table with my coffee, and I think about the cedar deck, and I miss it. I'd be lying if I said I didn't. But I don't regret the $180,000. I gave it freely, to my daughter, out of love. What I wasn't willing to give, and what no one had the right to ask for, was my name. My name is Margaret. I am Claire's mother. I was a nurse for 32 years. I am the reason there is a waterfall island in a kitchen in Burlington, and the next time anyone in Lakeview Estates asks, they will know exactly who I am.